Good evening and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the January 16th, 2018 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my privilege to call this meeting to order and welcome all of you here tonight. There are copies of our agenda on either side of the room. If you have not already done so, please feel free to pick one up and you can follow along with our proceedings tonight. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items that are on our agenda tonight, as well as a segment that is under item 5. Sorry, item 4. See, I should have picked up a copy so I could follow along. Under item 4 tonight is reserved for public comments of a general nature. This is the opportunity for members of the audience to come up and ask any questions or make any comments of a general nature with respect to things that are not on tonight's agenda. So at that point in the meeting, I will invite those present to come up, and we welcome hearing from you at that point in time. But first, it is our proud custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So I would ask everyone present to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for joining us. And I would now like to ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, Happy New Year. I didn't get to do that last week. To please call the roll.
Happy New Year. Commissioner Wallace?
Here.
Commissioner Earl? Here. Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner White?
Here.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. It brings us to item 3, which pertains to minutes of prior council meetings. We have one set of minutes to review and approve tonight. Those are our regular council meeting minutes from our January 9th, 2018 meeting, the first one of 2018. If there are no changes, comments, questions, or concerns, I would entertain, please, a motion to approve those minutes.
Mayor Tully, I move that this council approve the meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Those minutes are approved unanimously. That brings us to item 4. Just like that. This is the segment of the meeting that is reserved for public comments of a general nature. So if there are any members of the audience that have any questions or comments of a general nature with respect to things that are not on tonight's agenda, I would invite you to please come up to the podium, let us know who you are, and we welcome hearing from you. Are there any questions or comments of a general nature? Please. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. My name is Maggie Meyer. I live at 217 White Farm Trail. As you know, Downers Grove experienced heavy rain on October 14, 2017. Many residents were affected by this rain and experienced flooding in our homes. I'm here tonight representing my fellow neighbors in the Deer Creek subdivision, and we have been hit one too many times. Our neighborhood has flooded in 1988, 94, 96, 02, 04, 08, 09, 2013, and 2017. Several of those flooding events resulted in so much water that our streets were closed and we could not enter or leave our homes. We've asked for the village's help repeatedly with no change. As homeowners, in addition to paying property taxes and stormwater fees, we have taken many personal steps to protect our homes. Many of us have riders on our insurance policies protecting us from drain and sump pump failure. We have used sandbags. We have added sump pumps and battery backups. We replaced basement windows with glass block windows. Many of us have gas generators. We keep our belongings off the basement floor and in plastic bins. We start moving items to the main floor of our house when heavy rains are predicted. As homeowners, we have done everything possible to protect our homes. The damage that our homes have sustained is beyond what we, as homeowners, can control. We need the village's help, and we need it now. In an email dated October 26, 2017, I documented to Village Council members, Stormwater Management, Public Works, the Village of Westmont Council members, and many others how many homes were damaged on October 14, 2017. I included addresses of 17 homes, damages, and how the water came into each house. I received no response, not one. The Westmont Park District Retention Area behind White Farm Trail needs to be addressed as soon as possible. This area drains into the creek in our neighborhood, which drains into Barth Pond. These holding areas are not holding enough water, that is very clear. When a breach occurs, it affects over 100 residents and costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. Something must be done about this recurring problem. Not only is the water coming into our neighborhood too quickly, it's not draining properly. Stormwater Management has told us everything was working properly during the October flood. We recently read the Deer Creek Subdivision Stormwater Management Improvement Project Status Report that was released on December 14, 2017. The time frame for construction in that report stated 2020 to 2040, and that is not acceptable to us. We are asking that you make our neighborhood a priority. We understand that a study is being done in 2018 of our area. This will be 5 years past the 2013 flood, and the scope of the problem may or may not be identified. We would like to know what's being done now to help us and why it's taken 5 years since the 2013 flooding events to start to find where the problem is. We are here tonight to ask for a joint meeting with village council members and our neighborhood representatives. We have been asking for this meeting for months and we've not gotten a response. We will make ourselves available to meet with any or all of you who are willing to listen and work together on fixing this problem that has been ignored for too long. Thank you.
Thank you. And obviously, we empathize with the situation and the conditions in Deer Creek. They have persisted for a long time, even longer than you've mentioned, and have been well known to the community. It's unfortunately just the topography and the nature of the area is one where probably under modern standards it would have been built in the first place because it is a very challenging area. That doesn't make it any less of a priority. It's been a high priority. Some of the things in there do work as function, but with the amount of rain that we sometimes receive, even if they're operating as designed, they're just simply not sufficient. It's a challenge, and I'm not trying to make an excuse. I'm simply pointing out that we're very familiar with the challenge, the nature of the topography, the soil content, what's currently there in terms of improvements. You noted that it's not something the Village of Downers Grove can do by itself. At any cost, we have to do it in conjunction with the Village of Westmont. And yet, I have had conversations, and the village manager has had conversations. I'm sure that he will update as he chooses if there's anything beyond the December report. I've had conversations with Mayor Ron Gunter of the Village of Westmont, as well as Mr. Fieldman's counterpart over in Westmont, Steve May. Everyone recognizes it's an issue, so your obviously response is, well, then why isn't something being done? It's complicated, it's expensive, and there's a lot of other things that we have to take into account, but that doesn't mean that it's not important. We recognize that it's important, and I know the members of this council and past councils have talked to staff and suggested ideas, whether it's something that could be done through a public-public partnership, a public-private partnership, which would include participation by the residents, to somehow address the financial issues and the design issues. I think the study that's coming up will help, but it's not off the radar. I realize that there is no answer I could give you other than yesterday that would be acceptable. I fully appreciate that, but it is a high priority. In terms of meeting, I think many of us, myself included, have met with a number of your neighbors on multiple occasions over the years. So I've been there many times. I understand the layout. I understand the challenges. Happy to meet again. I'd be happy to be there. I think we have coffee with the council this Saturday from 9 to 10 at the public library. I'd be perfectly happy to come to your neighborhood immediately after that or before that, if that would be appropriate, or we can schedule some other time. Happy to do that. It's certainly on, I hate to say it's on the to-do list, but it is on the to-do list. I understand it's probably not perceived as being high enough on the to-do list, but that's because it is a very complicated stormwater challenge. It's the nature of the beast, but we're not throwing up our hands in despair and walking away from it. We are trying to do something. It does take a coordinated effort, though, with the Village of Westmont. And my understanding is that the Village of Westmont is willing to work with us on it. We're doing what we can. There are similar challenges, such as a very almost identical situation that is on the border of Westmont and Clarendon Hills, and I've been hearing from residents over there about the same kind of thing. So these are very much on the radar screen, and we will continue to try to work through it and get you some relief. We fully understand the problem. So thank you for keeping it on the radar screen, because I think that's important, and it shows your passion and dedication to the issue as well. So I'm getting the look that there's nothing more to add.
I think you covered it, Mayor. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Any other thanks? Well, thank you for being here. Any other questions or comments of a general nature from members of the audience? Hearing none, we'll move on. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. That brings us to item 5 on our agenda tonight, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Martelli, I move that this council approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items on tonight's consent agenda? Questions or comments from members of the village council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Burnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes unanimously and brings us to our active agenda, which is item 6. We have 4 items on our active agenda tonight. First, do I have a motion, let's reference item 6A as an apple. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use for 4832 Highland Avenue to permit a school addition with a variation?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use for 4832 Highland Avenue to approve a school addition with a variation as presented.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? Are there any questions or comments from members of the village council? May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. That brings us to item 6B as in boy. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance prohibiting the purchase and possession of alternative nicotine products by minors?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance prohibiting the purchase and possession of alternative nicotine products by minors as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments on this item from members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the village council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The matter also passes unanimously and brings us to item 6C as in Charlie. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending theater license provisions?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance amending theater license provisions as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from members of the audience on this item? Questions or comments from members of the village council? Commissioner Jose. I'll let Commissioner Jose go first because he wasn't here last week.
Yes, he wasn't here last time.
Thank you, Mayor. As you noted, I wasn't here for the lion's share of the conversation last week. Just wanted to weigh in a bit. I want to thank my fellow colleagues for raising certain concerns. I think I understand where most of them are coming from. I disagree with most of them for the most part. I think you've got an ordinance here that makes an awful lot of sense to keep the Tivoli competitive with other municipalities and other theaters, and I think you've got an exemplary applicant here who has a great track record, and they've been just wonderful citizens here individually in the Johnsons and in terms of a corporation with the Tivoli in Downers Grove for more years than I could name off the top of my head, that's for sure. So I want to thank them for continuing to be a tremendous part of Downers Grove and reinvest in Downers Grove, and I look forward to support this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Wallach.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I forgot to mention last week that in reading the minutes from the Liquor Commission, there was a reference to Mr. Willis. I assume it was Mr. Johnson, but anyway, they might want to amend that. Details. Anyway, I agree that the Tivoli is a special gem in Downers Grove. I have a great deal of respect for the Johnsons and the family. If there's any publication in Downers Grove that describes pillars of the community, the picture would be Willis and Shirley Johnson with the marquee in the background. They've been fabulous contributors to various causes, helping out with causes in the village, and also contributing in many other ways. But that's, this isn't about the Tivoli. This isn't just about having a glass of wine at a movie. This is about the village's duty to set standards. More than 99% of people will be responsible, unfortunately. It's the duty of the village government to protect people from irresponsible minority that will get alcohol to minors and that will overindulge. It isn't about being nice to one business. This is not a no-brainer. And when the village government starts cruise control in things start going awry. A few people will be selling alcohol probably to more people than anywhere else in the village. They will not be monitoring the behavior after the sale. The alcohol will be taken into a darkened, more than 1,000-seat auditorium where the controls we have long demanded will be lowered. Responsibility for the control and enforcement of the liquor laws that we have in place will be lessened, and the enforcement will be in the hands of a few, probably underage and untrained individuals. They may even have to enforce these laws against their own classmates. So no matter how much lipstick or how much how many multisyllabic words you use, or how long or great the oration, no matter how eloquent or not eloquent, this is a change or a lessening of standards. It's a lowering of standards. This is irrefutable, and while you can have a different opinion, you can't have different facts. This is a lowering of standards, or we wouldn't be talking about this tonight. If this council approves this lowering of standards, then they must apply these same standards across the board. What applies to the Tivoli should also apply to any of those who have or may apply for liquor licenses. I'm not ready to lower the standards, but I tell my fellow council members, but if you do and you don't apply it equally, then you will be hypocritical. I mentioned the Park District selling alcohol at their concerts next to their food trucks, relaxing the standards on the golf course, selling alcohol out of the concession stand at McCullum Park so that people can relax and enjoy a beverage, alcoholic beverage, while watching Little League games or soccer games. There are more controls in place than what is proposed at the Tivoli. I mentioned the Rotary Fest. Why not hard liquor? Why the silly rules? Why confine people to a small area where they can are just a few steps away from refills? Why not allow alcohol around the fest? They're less likely to run and get a refill if they're already located at Main and Curtis. It's a long way to get a refill, so it makes sense. The idea of protecting children from being surrounded by alcohol, that's gone. Why the silly rules? Apply the lower standards. Now I can see why the Chamber of Commerce, why our chamber supports this. The lowering standards of lighting, potential number of customers, and lower enforcement standards should be applied across the board. In Downers Grove, we have decided to come up with spot licensing, what I call, or design classifications. Spot zoning is illegal, yet we have tailored licenses to fit one person or venue. We used to think standards and laws apply equally. Dash that thought. Now we can easily approve what we like, disapprove what we don't like, approve who we like, disapprove of who we don't like. We can help those who belong to, nowadays I guess the term is, we can help those who are in our tribe, or decide that we don't want to help those who are in the other tribe. We can approve our donor class and disapprove the other donor class, except in Downers Grove, because we happen to have a law that forbids or suggests strongly that that holders of liquor licenses can contribute. They really can't contribute to village official campaigns. In this case, we are lowering the standards for a T license, or any theater that meets the definition. What's the definition? Basically, it's a place that provides film or live entertainment located in the downtown that seats a minimum of 900. Now, who can possibly qualify that other than the Tivoli? But it's a T license. This was such a no-brainer that I was the only one who questioned or commented on Section 3.33 last week. That section addresses all holders of alcohol licensees, and has a number of what I shall term thou shalt nots. But in order to give the Tivoli what it wants, the wording said that the Tivoli would be able to do any and all of those things that nobody else can do. And it was carte blanche. So for the folks that wrote in and said, no brainer, please read the section and see if you approve of all that activity. Most venues that sell liquor are better lit. They have better controls, fewer, more people per capita, per customer enforcing our laws, and they're generally of age and trained. Excuse me, not doing well trying to catch up here. Only a Class T license can show R-rated films. Some of the listed unlawful, some of the suggested unlawful acts in the ordinance are mostly related to sex acts, but are still rated R. By passing these changes, council is really saying that if you want to drink while watching R-rated movies, the same cases, in some cases it's porn light, you'll have to do so in a darkened 900-seat auditorium where the enforcement of all alcohol ordinance is likely to be enforced by fewer individuals per customer and likely to be underage and untrained. So that makes no sense to me. Seems the other license holders may be better qualified for such entertainment. I'm unwilling to lower the standards at this time, but if the majority of this council wants to relax standards, then they should be willing to apply the rules fairly and equitably across the board to all present and future liquor license holders. Don't do this because it's the Tivoli, but because the relaxation of standards is the right thing to do. Don't show favorites. Don't be hypocrites. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council? Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to be supporting this motion tonight. I just wanted to thank the public for the civic interest in this matter. It seemed to have been a topic of conversation over the past week, and I think that's fantastic. I just wanted to take the opportunity to continue to encourage everyone to be respectful of those opinions that are not of your own. While I don't agree with some of my fellow colleagues here on the dais, I do respect their opinion, and I just want to make sure that we continue to do that when we discuss issues and keep it in that vein. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council? Commissioner Barnett.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, it was ominous the way you said that.
I'll say it less ominous.
Say less ominous. There we go. Thank you. I'm supportive of this tonight. I heard certainly everything that was said last week and thought through it all, and want to clarify a few things that I think might be important for the public. This section 333 that's in question, it specifically takes aim at trying to prevent liquor licenses being granted to primarily gambling houses and what people might consider to be public adult live entertainment. You guys can let your imaginations go wild. There's a variety of things listed very much on purpose to that end. What this change makes, it does not say all of those things are now okay. But what it does do is recognize that in some cases R-rated movies have some things that might approach some of the prohibited live acts visually. And so it makes a specific line. It says those things are all still illegal by any license holder, provided, however, that Class T license holders should be allowed to show motion pictures or films classified by the motion picture industry as rated R or less. It's an important distinction, and I guess one could classify it as a lowering of standards. I'd classify it more as a change of standards. I've been involved in these liquor licenses described in various ways as boutique or custom for, help me, Enza, for over 14 years, something like that. What we've done is try and take the position that as a village we don't have every good idea, and we don't write ordinances for commercial activities today expecting them to never change. The ordinances that are here, and particularly as it relates to liquor and that have been created over the years, have in fact evolved. It's a tough word sometimes, but that's exactly what they've done. There were no liquor licenses for a variety of things, whether it be the game store down 63rd Street or the golf course. There was a time when brewing could not be used in the title of a business, for instance. There have been a variety of changes, and they've all been, one could certainly argue, lessening of standards, certainly lessening of restrictions, but what they've done is they've been an effort for the village to facilitate and be welcome to new business ideas that happen in our community. Not every one of them is great, and not every one of them has made it. Mayor probably could speak to that a little more than I, but certainly there have been people with ideas for businesses or liquor licenses that have not made it to this day as for amendment. I suspect they'll continue to change. Actually, I kind of hope it. And part of what I'm saying in my positive vote for this tonight is that I want people to see and hear and recognize that the village is interested in hearing your idea. It may or may not make it, but I don't want to say that because it was once one way, we're not interested in considering it again for the next period of time. Things change, and we're trying to evolve with them. In this instance, Bill's right. The definition of Class T is very narrow. Most of our licenses are relatively narrow. We tend to add a second or third or fourth license if there's a need for it. I suspect if somebody else opened up a 900-seat theater, we would treat them equitably. We do, in fact, treat everybody equitably under the law. So I'll be supportive of this tonight, and I'm thankful that the mayor took it to a point last week to try to give a little more context to it. I'd encourage all to revisit that if they have additional questions about how we got here. It's been a process over many, many years, and I have all confidence in the world that we'll be able to regulate this forward in a positive way. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner White?
Very, very briefly, I'll also be voting in favor of this petition. Initially, the arguments in favor have to go to keeping theaters competitive in the modern world. That's simply true. That said, I feel there are concerns. They're not concerns that grow great enough for me to vote no. And I'm comforted by the fact that the current ordinance does make it a violation of the liquor control ordinance for a person under 21 to have possession of alcohol within the facility. Is that a big risk? I don't know, and we're going to find out. But I'm willing to say yes. I'm willing to let them go forward because it is necessary to be competitive in the world, and hope, and no restrictions or controls on how they do it. From my point of view, they just simply have to follow the ordinance. And with that, I'll be voting yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Earl?
Yes, last week I had some questions, and the Willis Johnson and his wife very kindly came up and answered my questions and added some information that was pertinent to the discussion. I will be supporting this because I do believe that there's nobody else in town I would rather try this with than the Johnsons. They've been upstanding members of our downtown community for many, many years, and I believe if anybody deserves a chance to give this a try, it's the Johnsons. So I'm willing to give it a go, and we're going to hope for the best, I think.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your indulgence on a second round here. Just a couple of quick things. I understand the concern for protecting minors, protecting young folks from exposure to potential problems, but the fact is that there are establishments all over town with liquor licenses that have children in them every day. I've taken my family to I don't know how many different restaurants in town that have liquor licenses. Different organizations hold events at, say, Gatto's, where there's a full bar, at Emmett's, where there's obviously a full bar. I had dinner with my family on Saturday night at All Aboard Diner, which couldn't be more kid-friendly. and they serve the beer and wine. I don't see where expanding the availability to the Tivoli Theater somehow causes any different type of problem. Though I think my bigger concern with some of the comments earlier, or one particular comment, was the idea of tribalism. Somehow that we're somehow picking and choosing winners based on what one tribe, as was said, or another. Comments like that from the dais are pretty disappointing, and I hope we can avoid that sort of thing and act as one body for the collective interest of the community. Thank you.
Commissioner Waldeck.
Let me respond to Commissioner Jose in that that wasn't accusing anybody up here of any such thing. I'm just saying that when you get into specific classifications, it leaves open the possibility of favoritism, tribalism, donor class. And that's why I have a problem with design ordinances. And so it's not a disparaging about the council in general. It's just that I believe that having design liquor ordinances, spot ordinances, whatever you want to call them, is just not fair. It isn't across the board, and it allows for the possibility of tribalism, preferential treatment, etc. So I hope you'll take that in the spirit it was meant.
Understood. Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else want to go second before I chip in? Thanks. And just as an aside, the only tribe that I'm familiar with being a part of is in County Mayo in Ireland. That's the only tribe that I'm familiar with. Obviously, I'm going to support this, but I do want to try to address a few things to just clear the air. It is, there's been a long history. I've had the good fortune and privilege of being associated with the Village Council since 2001 with a break for a couple of years, and have seen a number of license categories requested by the business community because someone had an idea for a business in town that we wanted to facilitate potential success for. And one element of that business would include having a liquor license. And we don't just have willy-nilly ordinances, we have specific categories and defined licenses for a reason. Because I agree with the comments that have been made that it is important that we responsibly control the privilege of selling alcoholic beverages in our community. Like many things, it can be horribly misused, or it can be a responsible part of enjoying a vibrant community. We try very hard to keep it the latter, and we act swiftly and punitively for those that try to do the former. But there have been numerous occasions on which a business or a resident has come to us and has said, I would like to start a business, and as a part of that business, there will be the sale of alcohol. You do not currently have a license that allows for that. We try not to simply say, no, why don't you try Naperville? No, why don't you go to Westmont? No, why don't you go to Woodridge? No, instead what we say is, well, hold on a minute, let's hear more about what you have to say, and we'll see if the sale of alcohol in conjunction with your business plan is something that's reasonable and makes sense. Because if so, true to our motto of trying to be facilitators and not regulators, if it's reasonable and responsible, we'll consider it. So over the years, we've had licenses that included a comedy club, which ultimately didn't come to fruition. There was an entertainment license that was created that dealt with a certain business model. Some of those have worked well, as Commissioner Barnett said, and some have not worked out so well, primarily because not of the license, but of the operators. And I want to make that distinction and come back to it in a moment. There's a big difference between the license and the operators. So somebody, you can have a license, and then there's the person who holds the license. I'll come back to that in a second. But we've also had the license for the wine boutique. Again, something that didn't exist in our town, and we had businesses that wanted to create a wine boutique, and we had to create a license. And sometimes we create one, sometimes we create 2, 3, 4. It sort of depends, but it's always limited, and it's always conservative in that respect, because we don't want to be willy-nilly. And then we see how the experience works out. And with the wine boutiques, it's worked out very well. Sidewalk cafes worked out very well. Comedy club, not for lack of a license, but because the business model for, I think, those who pursued it just didn't pan out. The entertainment category, it's been a mixed experience, but we learn from it and we act accordingly. The theater license, and I want to emphasize the T license is not the Tivoli license, it's a theater license. That's what the T stands for. That was something that was first proposed for purposes of a new business model that back in 2009, when the food and beverage services that are now prominent in many theater settings wasn't as prominent back then. We were approached with, like with the comedy clubs, sidewalk cafes, wine boutiques, entertainment, and there's even more I'm leaving out. Is this a business model that we can help facilitate that includes a component of which is the sale of alcohol? So the theater license was created in 2009, and we wanted to see how it went. And it was restrictive at the time. It only allowed alcohol to be served at certain occasions, not all the time. But now we've had almost 10 years of experience with that T license. 10 years of experience, and there have been numerous events, movies, all ages movies, and I think I pointed out the Star Wars premiere, obviously attracts children, where it was a special event and alcohol was served, and same environment, it's a theater, you're watching a movie, so you know what the conditions are in a movie theater. And I've been struck by the fact that for almost 10 years, with the same exact circumstances existing as are held out as being the ones evoking concern amongst some, there have been no issues. And that sort of leads me to my next point. There's the license, and then there's the license holder. The council talks about the creation of the license and the parameters of the license. That's the legislative function that takes place here. There's another function, which is the administrative or the executive function, and that's what the liquor commissioner, me, does. And that's where we get into the controls. That's where we get into the enforcement. That's where we get into the sanctions for not following the rules and for doing things that are not responsible. To me, the biggest standard, and one that is unwavering and is not changing one bit, is we expect the holders of our liquor licenses, no matter whether it's a T, a B, a C, a D, I don't care what letter's in front of it, the standard is responsibility. Demonstrated responsibility. We expect it of all our license holders. And that's the standard as the liquor commissioner of the Village of Downers Grove I hold everyone to equally across the board. I don't care who you are. And there are those in this community that know that when they've tripped up and they've failed to control by, they're punished swiftly and appropriately. So I take issue and disagree with the conclusion that there is any lessening of a standard here. Because as the liquor commissioner, I take that responsibility extremely seriously, and I'm not lessening any standards here. In fact, I think the petitioners who wanted this category changed will know that we worked for some time to come up with this license. It was not simply given when it was asked. There was a back and forth because I wanted to make sure that this was an appropriate expansion that met with our experience and yet also facilitated a changed business model along the lines that Commissioner Barnett pointed out. But let's get down to the real nuts and bolts here. What controls are really changing? As I mentioned, we have almost 10 years of experience of alcohol being served during special events, including all ages events, in the same darkened theater, with the same people, the same business model, and we've had no issues. The controls aren't changing. It's just now there'll be more opportunities for the sale of the beverages. But I don't expect there'll be any lessening, and in fact, demand there will be no lessening of that same exemplary performance that has always occurred for the 10 years, or nearly 10 years, that this license has existed in earlier form, albeit more narrow. So I don't see this as a lowering of any standards whatsoever. What I see this as a demonstrated ability to meet the highest standard, which is responsibly handling the sale of alcohol in a way that is consistent with not only the changing world and the changing environment, but also meeting a number of other goals, which is facilitating not only a wonderful place for people to visit here in our downtown, but also to support the success of our business community. Now, if it doesn't work out, or if there are problems, there's a very simple solution to that, and we have controlled buys. We have mechanisms to check and make sure that the specters that have been described as this may happen or that may happen, we can make sure that doesn't happen, because if it does, it's a very simple process, ladies and gentlemen. It's called the liquor commissioner, me, pulls the license. And if you think I've never done that, someone should check the record, because I just did it not too long ago with another classification, when someone was not responsible. So yes, there are controls, there are standards, and they will be enforced as long as I'm mayor, no less strictly than they have for the entire time that I've been mayor. But I have to say that I'm pretty sure that given a almost 10-year track record of the highest responsibility, I don't have any concerns. If I'm proven wrong, then the control is sitting right here in the center chair. The license gets pulled away, or there are penalties and there are sanctions, just like anybody else that violates our liquor laws. So there's no favoritism here whatsoever, and I just want to clear the air on some of those things. I do understand the concerns. I do understand the desire to make sure that liquor sales are handled properly, and I want those who think differently on this issue to understand that in my mind, this is no lessening of standards whatsoever. I expect the highest responsibility, and I also have the confidence that will continue to be demonstrated here. Once again, just because the license has been changed, the owner still has to apply and demonstrate that they can continue to hold it. It's not a right, it is a privilege, and is one that one has to continue to demonstrate that they're able to meet on a regular basis. So I, again, see multiple levels of controls here and a very effective enforcement mechanism if this doesn't work out as I expect it will. So that's why, and I'm providing this context because a lot of different issues have been touched upon both this week and last week. I provide that primarily for context and also feel obligated to do so as the principal enforcement mechanism for liquor control in this town. So with that, since this is something that I've actually been working up in the first place, I was satisfied with, I continue to be satisfied with, but I appreciate the input from my colleagues, and as Commissioner Wallace noted, to appreciate the input from many in the community. It's always good to hear from folks. I went on and on and on, so I'm going to see if anyone wants to say anything after my closing argument. Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Nay.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes 6-1. That moves us on to item 60 as in David. Do I have a motion to approve Downtown Development Regulatory Framework? I'm sure there'll be no discussion on this.
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt the Downtown Development Regulatory Framework as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from members of the audience? Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. Hi, Ron Castro Giovanni. I just wanted to comment that first that I am supportive of the ordinance as presented today, particularly as it impacts me and my neighbors, and we live that southeast corner, very near to the southeast corner of Washington and Rogers. I do have one concern, though, and I think it's something that's not necessarily addressed in the planning, but it's something as we improve development of those properties, is that currently, as the downtown area of Downers Grove has been developed, when we have very large attendance at the Tivoli, and I'm all for a big supporter of the Tivoli. We have parking lined all the way down Rogers Street, oftentimes well past Elm, well past Washington, well down in front of my house, because they're great crowds, and that's a great thing. And so as we continue to develop the downtown area, because what I see in the plan, it seems that we're looking for a little bit taller buildings, a little bit more retail, more residents, more shoppers, more patrons. We take into consideration as we approve those, increasing some more availability of public parking on the north side of the tracks, because it is sorely needed, whether it's within the structures that are being built themselves or somehow with an addition of parking lots, because not only is it inconvenient to residents at times, quite honestly, on Rogers Street, which is really not built to have parking on one side of the street. Somehow we put a line down the middle of the street, and then you can't drive on it and stay within on the correct side of the double yellow line. If you're heading east, it actually can create a hazardous situation. So I've supported. I like the idea. I like the change that was made from a transitionary standpoint, but I do have the one concern, because we're increasing density not only from a business standpoint but also from a resident standpoint, and it could further contribute to some of the parking problems at times.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. And on that, I think this is probably as good a time as any to highlight sort of the process and what next steps are, given sort of where the plane is at from approach to landing, and the details being very important, and that coming later. I'll ask our village manager, it's probably as good a time as any to share that once again.
Right, you may recall this is a three-phase project. The final phase, phase 3, will result in the actual ordinances, the laws, the final zoning map that will control development as proposed in our village, in particular in the downtown. The previous 2 phases are the comprehensive plan phase and the framework we're in now, which is phase 2, which is really the bullet point. The comprehensive plan does address the issue of providing additional parking on the north side of the tracks in the downtown. It's one of our top priorities. So that will remain as a recommendation.
A guiding force.
A guiding force, if you will. And then when we get to the final phase after the framework is approved, the final regulations, the parking standards that must be put in place for each type of development will be finalized, and we will use the comprehensive plan as a guide when we establish those final regulations.
And there are opportunities consistent with that guiding force for tweaking and as we get down to the brass tacks, so to speak.
Absolutely, yes, well said there.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, gentlemen and ladies. Just wanted to say thank you very much for listening to me and a few of my neighbors a couple weeks ago when we talked about that block that Ron was just talking about eloquently. I think it's a good move from a public safety standpoint because that is one of our major crosses across the train tracks, the whole Washington Street thing. So I applaud you and also applaud the liquor license. I look forward to having a beer next time I walk to the lake.
I'm glad you clarified that. Thank you. Other questions or comments on this item from members of the audience? Very good. Thank you for the input. Other questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Commissioner White?
Well, I want to say that I very much support adopting the regulatory framework with focusing on the word that we're talking about, a framework. By and large, I believe the framework continues the direction established by the comprehensive plan. There will be some tweaking that remains to be done. Some of the specific properties have some of the 3 problem properties came up at the end have some exceptions that may be properly dealt with the plan development. That's hypothetical. So I just want to make sure that that's on the record, that I'm not convinced that all 3 properties neatly fit into any one category, but we choose a category most consistent with the comprehensive plan for going forward. So basically, I look forward to proceeding with this framework, knowing that there's tweaks, to use the mayor's word, that need to happen, and there are some unresolved issues that we'll need to discuss before the plane finally lands on the runway. But I think we're definitely headed in the right direction.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. I too think that this is the right outcome consistent with the comprehensive plan. And it's an outcome that's been a long time coming. We've been working on this project now for almost 2 years, I believe. And for those who are concerned about pieces of it, I want to emphasize that it's not over. There's more work to do, and this process was actually started as the result of feedback received based on developments that came to downtown that folks weren't happy with some or all of the elements of it. So that just because we're coming to, once the ordinances are done, a conclusion of this process doesn't mean that anything is necessarily chiseled in stone. Things change as we receive feedback, as more projects come forward, as more projects are built, and we learn from those experiences. So I'm pleased with the way it has come out thus far, and I look forward to the ordinances, and hopefully everything moves smoothly going forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions, comments? Commissioner Burnett?
Thanks, Mayor.
Is that better?
That was much better, thank you. I wanted to remind everybody who may be watching and following in pieces and fits and starts along the way. As Greg said, this is a continuation of a process, and it's a process that a couple of councils prior, and certainly this one, are committed to continuing, that has to do with long-range planning, comprehensive planning, and evolving and reacting and refocusing our efforts. we look in the mirror and we see what our planning has yielded, and then we decide if we need to adjust going forward. These are some adjustments. Those adjustments will happen all the time, and they will happen throughout town as we are committed to approximately a 5-year annual evaluation of our comprehensive plan. We do our best to plan. We engage our residents to plan, and then we try and implement it. And then we decide if it needs adjustment. And in this case, we're going to hopefully continue down the path of making some adjustments. This happens to deal with downtown. But those too will then be 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, look back on and decide if we're getting the types of continued development in the ways that we're comfortable with or not, and we'll adjust again. So I'm thankful for this council and thankful for this mayor and thankful for our staff and also councils prior, the last 3, 4, 5, who have committed to this process. And I'm sure we'll continue forward. Doing a bunch of good work. This is part of the process, as boring and dry as it sometimes is, as long, 22 months worth or something as it sometimes is. But it's good work by your elected village leaders to plan, act, and then evaluate and adjust if necessary. Thanks, Mayor.
Well said, Commissioner. Thank you. Other questions or comments from the council? I'm just going to slightly change the metaphor, but I think it's an apt one. And I refer to those 3 properties as special properties. I'm going to be more upbeat about it. And I want to start out by just thanking everybody who participated in this process. This is a lot of work, and this is tough stuff. This is the hard work that communities do. It's a lot easier to talk about this than actually do it. And I commend everybody who's been involved, both presently and in the past, to get to where we're at today and where we're not done. It's, as mentioned, a phase in the process. We've got great input from the community and property owners, for which we appreciate very much. Obviously, this was something that has taken time by design, because we want to work through it and get input from everyone. I would appreciate all the time and effort my colleagues have spent on it. There's more to come, of course, and all the time that I know this takes for staff. Our planning department, I know, has worked really hard on a lot of this and contributed a lot of time and effort to it, and that we're grateful for all of that. But to come back to the different metaphor is, as I sort of view it, is that the comprehensive plan was sort of the painting of what we wanted the future of the community to look like. What we just did was the architectural schematics. So now we have more detailed drawings of how we're going to get the picture. But then the next phase is actually doing it in the field. And as anyone who's ever built a home knows, you take those architectural drawings and you go into the field, you're going to encounter issues that you have to make some adjustments on the fly. Reasonably and mindfully, but you're going to have to make some adjustments because things don't quite turn out as neatly as the plans might indicate. And we want to have that flexibility to make those adjustments in the field, so to speak. So whether it's the airplane, let's landing, or taking the big picture down to the schematics, down to the actually in the field, I want to make sure that we have that flexibility to deal with those special issues at the end that don't quite fit neatly, and we'll make sure that we're treating them ultimately consistent with the bigger picture, which is the comprehensive plan, which now we can call our guiding force. So I just want to thank everyone for all the good work on that. And with that, I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. And it is gratifying to say that that passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our active agenda. Item 7 is our first reading, our workshop segment of our agenda. We have no items under the first reading agenda tonight, so that brings us to item 8, which is the mayor's report. And as mentioned, first and foremost, we have Coffee with the Council this Saturday from 9 to 10 a.m. at the Downers Grove Public Library. This is an opportunity for members of the public to come and share any views or ask any questions, or occasionally we get a compliment from with members of the Village Council on a much more informal basis. So please feel free to come down, join us, get out of the cold, visit the library, have a cup of coffee with us, and we'd love to hear what's on your mind. That's this Saturday from 9 a.m. till 10 a.m. at the Downers Grove Public Library. The other thing I want to mention is, as everyone knows, yesterday was Martin Luther King Day, which is also a national day of service, a day on which everyone, particularly governments both large and small, call upon their residents to observe the day by serving and giving back to the community. But it doesn't need to be limited to one day. I just want to take the opportunity to remind everyone that DuPage County is continuing its Do Good DuPage campaign which is designed to come up with 150,000 people within DuPage County, which boasts almost 1 million residents, to transform our community through service. And that is an ongoing year-long program that started last year and continues through this period. So let's not think of it as a national day of service, but a county-wide period of service. Those interested in seeing more or learning more about what I'm talking about, you can visit givingdupage.org, and there's a whole page about the Do Good DuPage campaign, hashtag Do Good DuPage. So let's all embrace the ongoing period of service with respect to our communities and DuPage County overall. So with that, I have nothing further on the mayor's report. I will go to item 9, which is the manager's report. Mr. Fieldman.
Thank you, Mayor Tully. No report tonight.
Thank you. That brings us to, I'm going to put the attorney's report on there just so you have to say there isn't one. Ms. Petrarca, good evening. Attorney's report.
Good evening, Mayor. I have no report tonight. Thank you.
All right, very good. That brings us to item 10, which is for council member reports. This is an opportunity for members of the village council to share with those present and those watching at home either items of interest or other goings on in the community, which there always are exciting things going on in Downers Grove, or to share something with the rest of the council based on their liaison role to other public entities. I'll start at my far right tonight with Commissioner Jose. Good evening.
Good evening. No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Waldak, is there anything exciting coming up?
Nothing I can think of, Mayor. However,
something to do with ice is coming up soon, right?
oh, the Ice Festival, yes.
Never too early to talk about that. You don't have to.
Well, I wasn't quite prepared for that tonight. I'm still in January mode, and I wasn't thinking far enough ahead for February.
That was a teaser. There'll be more on it next meeting.
However, taking something from Commissioner Jose mentioned something weeks ago about the possibility of a new business. I'm not looking for any discussion tonight, but it's rather difficult to talk to each individually and get word out to the public to get some feedback on something. So I'm not looking for anything tonight, but based on the vote that was taken tonight and the invitation to the Park District and others, in order to be fair, I'm seriously considering new business of adjusting 3.33 to allow responsible holders of liquor licenses also to be able to, if they want, to have R-rated entertainment in order to be fair. I'm not sure there are any requests out there. I'm not sure it's such a wonderful idea, but it is fair. It does even the playing field, so to speak. So, just a thought there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just on that note, I would prefer to treat it on a request or petition-driven basis. So if there's somebody who has a proposal to do such a thing, I would like to consider it in that context and not in a more amorphous, generic fashion. But I understand what you're getting at, and certainly your voice is being heard by anyone watching. And if there's someone who wants to come forward with a proposal, we're glad to consider it. The Park District knows how to find us.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Wallace.
No report tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go back to my left. Commissioner Barnett.
I have no report, Mayor.
Commissioner Earl.
Come see us at the library on Saturday. We'll be there from 9 to 10. Other than that, no report, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner White.
This evening, I have two items. First, as I've said before, many of this know this, I'm involved with a group called DG Frog, which has enrichment classes on Saturday morning. Enrollment's open. Classes start on January 27th. Some of the interesting classes are cupcake decorating, which usually fills up. All 3 sessions normally get packed up. And once again, I'm doing introduction to quadcopters, introduction to drones in the cafetorium at O'Neill. And to have kids fly drones around, they just love it. So there's still a few spaces left in that, and there's a whole lot of other classes that are available. I'm also doing drone racing, so we're going to race the little guys. DGFrog.org is where you find out more about that. I may have more details next week. Classes start Saturday, January 27th. And second, on Sunday, I was very pleased. I attended the premiere at the barn at the Downers Grove Museum, a program being run by the Art Department, called the Art Department, which is a newly formed entity within the last year that's trying to promote art in the community, use art to connect with the community, use art to grow the community. And the exhibition will be at the barn for another 4 or 5 weeks, 6 weeks. It's an excellent program, an excellent group, and I just wanted to give them a shout out. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And the only thing I'll add is that the 2018 Downers Grove Ice Festival, sponsored by the Downtown Management Corporation, will be taking place from Friday, February 9th through Saturday, February 10th in, of course, beautiful downtown Downers Grove. More details to come from Commissioner Waldeck, so stay tuned. And, of course, if you can't wait and you just have to know what's going on beforehand, you can always visit downtowndg.org for more details of all the activities coming up. No matter how cold it is outside, it's always hot in downtown Downers Grove. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Martelli, I move that this council adjourn.
Second. Have a roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you and good night.